So now let's talk about tethering, and let's start with the gear and everything that you may need on set to be able to shoot tethered. So obviously the first thing is your camera. If you don't have a camera, you're not able to shoot, so you're not able to shoot tethered. Not all cameras are compatible, but you can check if yours is by visiting this link. So once you've made sure that your camera is compatible, one thing that I would advise is to always have additional batteries with you. Because you are going to plug your camera to your computer, the USB 3 or USB 2 or whatever connection you are going to use, it is going to drain the battery quite quickly. So as I said, additional batteries and then something to connect your camera to the computer. So I personally have a Nikon D810, so I'm using a USB 3 cable. All the cables that I use are from the brand Tether Tools. That's just because it's the only brand that I've found so far that's reliable to plug my camera into my computer. And if you're working on a laptop, it's always wise to have the power cord with you so you can keep it plugged in all the time. Because if your laptop is going to shut down while you are shooting, you're going to lose the last few files that you've just shot. That wouldn't be extremely practical. Finally, one thing you can also bring with you is an external hard drive so you can make a backup wherever you're shooting, so you don't need to go back to the office to save your files. Some cameras, when you shoot tethered, will not save the files onto the SD card or CF card. So it's even more important to have an external hard drive to make a backup during or after the shoot. Now that I've shown you all the gear you need to shoot tethered, let's go on set and I'll show you how to use it live. So we are now on set with our model and we are going to create a new session so we can start working and start shooting. So to create a new session, we are going to open Capture One and then give it a name and click New Session. So start by the date, so it keeps everything organized and neat on our computer. I usually indicate what kind of photography I'm doing. So for example, for today, it's going to be beauty. So type in beauty and then the name of the job. So f-stoppers, for example. Then press OK. If we go to the capture tab, we don't have any camera plugged in. That's normal because we need to plug the camera in. So we are going to grab our USB cable and the camera. Once it's plugged in, we just have to switch on the camera if it's not already. And it should be recognized by Capture One quite quickly. You get all of the settings as well. So for example, shutter speed, ISO, aperture, which you can change as well directly from Capture One. So if you are shooting still life, that means you don't need to touch your camera anymore. You can leave it on a tripod and just changing everything from Capture One. So for example, here I'm shooting at f8. If I'd like to change it to f5.6, just click on there, click f5.6, and it has changed on the camera. That's going to be available for most cameras. Now, if you go further into the other tools, such as the camera settings here, some of the tools and options are not going to be available for all cameras. Usually Phase One will offer all of the settings for their cameras. Nikon has most settings as well available, but some other brand will have fewer options. When shooting, I've got a default name, which is the next capture naming. By default, it gives it the name of the session with a camera counter. I like it, but I think we can make it better by just adding a dash. So I just click on the three dots and then here add the dash to separate the counter from the name. If you'd like to add any other element or text, you can do it here, as we've seen when we've imported files into our session. Press OK. So when shooting, usually you've got a few test shots to be sure that the light is perfect. In Capture One, if you don't want to save those files, there is a neat option that's called composition mode, and it's easily accessible under camera and then composition mode. So if I take my camera now, I take a test shot, as you will see, I'll get crosses in every corner of my frame, indicating that the file is not saved. So composition mode is extremely useful for testing purposes and not eating space when you don't have a large hard drive. Personally, I prefer to create a separate folder for my pre-light shots so that I'm sure I save them as well, because you never know, sometimes you want to go back into your pre-lights and check what you did and what lighting setup you used, or perhaps you like the shot so you want to use it. So what I do, I create a separate folder and I place all my prelights in there. So here in the library, I'm going to right click on the capture folder and then click show in library. It's going to bring up my folder in the library as it would in the Finder. Here I'm going to simply right click again on capture, click new folder, and then give it a name. So for example, here I'm going to create one folder for my prelight and then another one for the look that I'm going to shoot. If you were to shoot, for example, in the tutorial with 4 looks, you could create 4 different folders. So let's go ahead and call that prelight, press OK, create a second folder, so right click, new folder, and then call that look 1, press OK. And now I've got my 2 folders inside capture. If I go back up into the session folders, as you can see, I don't see any of the folders I've just created. That's because I need to add them or define them as my capture folder or add them as favorite so I can find them easily and I don't need to go back into my library every time, which is just a loss of time when you're on set. So let's go back to my folder here. So look 1, right click on that and then add to favorites, and same with prelight. Because prelight is going to be the folder that we are going to start using, we are going to define it as the capture folder as well. So it's up to you, but usually I don't save it as a favorite. So let's press no in my case, and as you can see here, now we have a camera icon next to prelight and a small heart next to prelight and look 1. That's because we can find the folders right below the session favorites, and the other one, the prelight, is defined as capture. That's why we've got those icons. So now if I click on the capture folder of my session and start shooting, the pictures that I'm going to shoot are going to go into the prelight folder and are going to show on capture 1. Obviously, if you don't want to take the time to create a prelight folder, you don't need to go through all the trouble I just went through to create folders. Just shooting into the capture folder would be fine as well. So let's go and shoot one picture to see how it shows on capture 1 and where we can find it in the Finder. I left the composition mode enabled. My picture is actually not saved, so let's disable that and make another shot. So let's go here, camera composition mode disable, and then make a new picture. So now with composition mode disabled, all the pictures are going to be saved. So we've got all of our shots and they are in the prelight folder. So if we go to the library again and right click on the prelight folder and show in Finder, if we double click on prelight, we've got the raw files in there. So now if you want to start shooting, because the lighting is correct and we are all dialed in, we can simply change the capture folder and go ahead and start shooting. So let's close the Finder and right click on look 1 and then set as capture folder. So now the folder has changed. If we click on the capture folder, as you will notice, we don't have any file anymore. That's absolutely normal because the files we shot before are in the prelight folder. So let's shoot a new image and see where it is in the Finder. So here we have our shot. If we right click on the capture folder and show in Finder, we have look 1 here. So let's change the view. So look 1 has 1 file and prelight has 2 files. So one quick tip that you could use if you start using the different folders is to add the folder name in the file name. So then if you move them around on your computer, you can have all the files that are properly named and you know if it was prelight or actually a certain look. One of the biggest advantage of shooting tethered is that you can actually edit your picture live and then all the settings are going to be applied to any picture that you take after the one that you've adjusted. So let's try to edit this one a tiny bit, just quickly as if we were shooting on set, and then take a new shot, and as you will see, we'll have all the settings that are applied to the new shot. So here, let's say, for example, we want to make a black and white shot. So I'm going to my presets or styles, and then under user styles, I'll take some of my black and white styles. So let's try and see which one works best. So for example, this one, let's go with that. And then if I go back to capture, in the capture tab, in the next capture adjustment, I can choose which adjustment I want to paste onto my future files. So you can choose, for example, just the metadata, just the orientation, or everything else, which is the exposure, the color, the black and white, and all of that good stuff. So let's check that it's actually copying everything from the last, which is the case here. So other and copy from last. The rest is default, and default is actually copy from last. So you can change to copy from primary. If you have a primary variant defined, then it will take all the settings from the primary variant instead of the last picture you just took. So let's leave it to default and other to copy from last. So now if I take a new picture, the new file is already edited. I didn't do anything, and that's a huge time saver. So when I get back to the office and start editing, I don't actually need to edit as much as I used to, because I don't need to edit everything. I've got my file that's already pre-edited, and I just have to put the final touches on the files that I've selected. It's actually useful as well when you are working with clients on set, so they don't need to imagine how it could look like after processing a file. So for example here, if they don't like the black and white, I can go back to my computer and just reset by pressing the back arrow here, and then I could, for example, adjust the contrast, add some clarity, and desaturate a tiny bit the file. So if the client is liking that, now I can keep on shooting, and that new change will apply to any future file that's shot. So shooting tethered to me is extremely important. That's actually one of the reasons why I moved from Lightroom to Capture One. It helps me communicate better with my team and with everyone that's on set, and it's much faster to deliver the final product to my customer. They can see it on set, and I don't need to change everything, go through a gallery for them to approve my editing. They can approve it on set. So it truly makes my workflow much easier and much more efficient.